Hey everybody, I'm Lady Sulavine and welcome to my realm of purpose. Today's video is going to be a little bit different. So, not too long ago, I got together with Cole from the Kingdom to discuss the Elven Gods. It's an amazing channel. You should absolutely go check it out. He makes Dragon Age content, he's been making it for what seems like forever. It's really high quality, interesting stuff. And he also does a lot of other things too. So go check out his channel before you ever watch anything else of mine. It's definitely worth a look. As I said, we got together to talk about the Elven Gods. We start out talking about our favourites, and then it just delves into the interpersonal relationships. That is the best summary I can give at the start of the video. As I said, go check out his channel if you haven't already. It's awesome, and I hope you guys enjoy the video. Yeah. Okay, we will start with Falindin then. Falindin, the elven god of fortune and the dead, the twin brother to Dirthamin, and together they are the eldest children of Elgornan and Mythal, the All-Father and the All-Mother of the Pantheon. So, before I get into the rest of it, I was kind of hoping to get your thoughts on it, because I know you did a video a few years back, but I don't know if your opinions changed, or I don't know, before I start on about what I think.
It's hard to say. We haven't had a lot of new content. Actually, honestly, I didn't even realize he was the god of fortune until just when you mentioned it. I looked it up in the world of Thetis. Yeah, that's a very interesting connection, being the god of the dead and of fortune. But I'm curious, you said he's your favorite of the elven gods, and I'm curious why that is.
Well, I want to start off with a little bit of Scotland into the mix.
Okay.
So I don't speak fluent Scottish Gaelic, but I do know a few phrases, a few words. And there is a word that sounds a lot like Falindin in it, a Faragdin, which means feeling.
Hmm.
And I kind of always equated that to being emotion. So it's like, I am feeling blah blah blah. So I always equated that to Falindin being rather an emotional person, and I feel like that just fits in with the lore a good bit.
I can see that.
Uh, yeah, so that's just a quick fun fact. So, okay, we're gonna focus on the death and the dead part first. So, in Elvish or Elven, that language, there's three kind of words that get listed for death. There's din, which means dead, as in the dead. There's dinan, which is death or the end. And then there's dinan shiral, which I think Solus says it. I can't remember when. Trespasser.
Yeah, he says that in Trespasser.
Yeah, and I think the wiki is what cites it, meaning like the journey towards death.
That makes sense. Dinan Hiral. Wait, I'm sorry, what is it? It's Dinan Shiral.
Dinan
Shiral
shiral.
means a journey. We know that
Yeah.
from the long march to Hallam Shiral.
Mm-hmm.
And if Dinan means death, then yeah, journey of death.
Yes.
That makes sense.
I just kind of always interpret it as being a fancy way of saying dying. So we have dead, death, and dying. Those kind of pretenses. So when we take a look at Falindin, it's friend of the dead. So it's Din being dead, blah blah blah. So it's not of death or of dying, specifically the dead. And when we take a look at other mythologies, they have their own unique ideas surrounding death. Like in ancient Egypt, you would have Osiris, who would be this god of the afterlife. You have Nephthys, an overseer of funerals. You have Anput of mummification. Anubis, who was the judge of the dead. Ammit, who was more like a demon, but kind of a god that devoured the impure dead. You know, the heart weighing more than the feather. But if you look at Greek mythology, they also have different concepts surrounding death when it comes to otherworldliness. Charon or Charon, who's the ferryman of the dead. You have Thanatos, who's a personification of death. Then you have Hades, who's like an overseer of the underworld and the dead. So there are similar concepts out there. I need to take a breath.
Well, of all of those, I mean, the Dalish legends would equate Falindin more with Charon the ferryman.
Mhm.
because
Definitely.
he's the guide to the dead.
Mhm.
And Elven Afterlife is kind of a foggy subject.
Yeah. Especially when you try and put the difference between ancient elves and their concept of death
Right.
versus what modern elves think of death. Like, it's quite two different things, really. Well, or could be. We don't know
Hmm.
for sure.
Which is interesting because the elves insist they used to be immortal, which they technically did. And, oh, God, death always gets weird when we start talking about immortality.
Yeah. Like death in the real world is just this big concept, and imagine it would be for the elves, even back in the ancient era. So you have like these gods of death, death adjacent. So I'm kind of drawn to Falandin because this conceptualization of putting a god of something so otherworldly is kind of like trying to rationalize something that is so terrible and unknowable, like regardless of what you believe. Like death is a scary topic, and it's just fascinating seeing so many different cultures try and make it less scary by personifying it in some way.
Hmm.
So with Fallon Din, it just gets that little bit extra interesting. Like with the Dalish, what they believe of Fallon Din, like trying to help people get to the afterlife in a way, or at least along those lines. But for a minute, let's just conceptualize the ancient elves, Elvenan, magic wonders, and imagine a god of the dead to a civilization where people are immortal. They have an immortal comprehension of that. It's kind of interesting, like, to look at that immortality. We know that they did die on occasions. Like, you would have sacrifices, you would have, what was it, the Duel of 100 Years, where one of the two champions between Elgar'nan and Falandin, one of them died
Hmm.
to prevent civil war. So we know that they did die, so it makes sense that Falandin would still be a god of the dead in that way. To parallel this again with ancient Egypt, you would have mummification in a way. That's their way of entering this afterlife, this after state. And I like to compare that with the Euthenera in a way, because only the ludicrously rich would get to go through that process,
Hmm.
really. Because you would have to have people taking care of you, cleaning your body, making sure you're drinking that honey herbal water until you reach a state of perfection, which you might not reach. It's a very expensive process. But those people aren't dead. But people did die. So my theory is that Falandin was kind of a god for the poor, because they're the ones who are dying. So
Hmm.
yeah, that's my hot take on that. Like, his followers would have been the sick, the poor, the downtrodden, those expecting to die unnatural deaths as a consequence of their position in society.
Hmm.
So, like, comparing that with all the other gods, with their flashy titles, like Mythal with justice, Andruil with hunting, all the rest of them, they all kind of have very flashy, let's live this next day the best way we can kind of titles. Falandin's more, this is the end of the line. He's not exactly a god you would want to be worshipping,
Right.
you know? So that's just kind of fascinating to me, especially when you compare it to everyone else. Like, yeah.
Well, ever since Inquisition, I felt like Falandin's status for the dead came from his bloodthirstiness because of because he began such brutal wars to gain more followers. And I mean, I've always been of the opinion that conquering people is not the way to get them to agree with you.
Well, yeah,
It
maybe.
seems he didn't get that idea.
Mhm.
That's the direction that I felt they were taking. But I could see worshiping him in the way of like begging for mercy. So,
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be a Falandin follower
mhm.
as much as I love him.
My favorite elven god is Durthaman because he is so enigmatic and his sphere of secrets feels to me like knowledge, like he's the god of knowledge. And I've always valued wisdom and intelligence over like martial prowess because while Falandin was powerful because he had armies, he had probably extremely powerful magic that was similar to necromancy in some way. Elgranon was obviously very powerful. Mythal was powerful. But Dirthamin was powerful in a totally different way. The idea that he became the master of fear and deceit. It's referred to in a tale of him and Falindin. The ravens came to him and tried to trick him into thinking Falindin didn't love him. And Dirthamin was like, no, shut up. And no, now you're my slaves. So that's kind of what happened. And he became the keeper of secrets, the master of fear and deceit. Like, fear and deceit are weapons in themselves. And it sounds like those are typically negative ideas. But then again, those are the same weapons that Batman uses. So they're not inherently bad. And an incredibly shrewd person like Dirthamin seemed to be can make exceptional use of them without being overt. And that's why he almost seems to me to be the most powerful, because he knows things that no one else does, none of the other gods know. And it's just such a cool concept to me.
Yeah, you don't really see it much in a lot of other mythologies. It's usually them utilizing it in some way, but with Dirthamin it feels like he's hoarding it. You don't know what he's up to. Like,
I'm not as well versed in mythology as probably you are, but it does bring to mind Thoth or Thoth, the Egyptian god of knowledge.
Yeah.
I think that might be the closest comparison I can think of.
The only other comparison I could kind of think of is actually Odin from Norse mythology.
That does make sense, yeah.
Especially since he's got I can't remember, he's got two ravens that are kind of like his spies, Hugin and Milgen, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But he's kind of like this pursuer of knowledge. The lengths he would go to attain new knowledge is kind of crazy. Like, he hung himself from the world tree I can't remember the exact story, but he gained some kind of secret knowledge for doing some pretty crazy stuff.
And that is interesting because wasn't Odin famously afraid of death?
Maybe?
Well,
I'm not an expert in mythology.
I think that was kind of what led to Ragnarok. Like, he was afraid to die. I don't know. I might be talking out of my ass there. Someone in the comments correct me if I'm wrong. But if that's the case, that connects him further to Falindin. And I mean, my theory on their relationship, because some people have suggested it was brotherly, which is how the Dalish view it. Some people see them as lovers. I always like the idea that they were rivals, which kind of fits with Dragon Age, particularly 2, because, you can be someone's friend or you can be their rival, but either way, if you have enough points in either one, then they don't abandon you.
Oh.
So a rivalry is still a connection that the two of them can have, and there's sources that point to the oldest Elven sources never name the two directly. They name Falindin as Dirthamin's shadow, and Dirthamin as Falindin's reflection. So some people have taken that to suggest one is a spirit, one is a mortal, perhaps even that they shared the same body. But yeah, I personally prefer my rival theory.
I think I quite like that more as well. Like, I can definitely see it being not split personality, but either a possession thing going on, or it's not called split personality disorder.
Dissociative identity.
That one, yeah. It's maybe something like, I can definitely see that happening because there's just so much, Dirthamin's shadow, Falindin's reflection. Like, there's definitely that association there, but there's definitely a separation as well. There's a codex, twins in shadow, where even in lore they get confused for one another. They're never seen without each other, but that's just not true. Like, there are definitely codex entries that are just about Falindin or just about Dirthamin. They have that separate identity going on. But I really like the rivals thing, because they do seem entirely opposites. One feels loud and brash and going out and doing things, and then the other is not introverted, but
Just like
keeping.
hanging back. It's like the difference between a spy master and a general.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. It's definitely one of the coolest relationships that the Elven Gods have, I think.
Mm, definitely. I think that works perfectly. These are our two favorites too,
Yeah.
because they bounce off of each other in a way.
Who do you want to talk about next? Because I kind of want to get into Valandin and Elgernon.
Oh goodness, yes.
So we got the codex entry from, was it Trespasser or the Temple of Mythal, where it was the Duel of the 100 Years?
Uh, it's the Vir Defara Duel of 100 Years, so it would have been Trespasser.
Okay. So they had champions that fought, and the two of them were in some kind of disagreement, which is interesting because Valandin was supposedly Elgernon's son, and the story of Elgernon is that he overthrew his father, who was, the actual solar son. So there's like a generational thing going on here.
Yeah.
But that could just be hyperbole. They might not actually be related.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, Elgernon.
I like to think they are in a way because it definitely feels that way.
Yes, I agree. It works with Mythal stepping in and stopping Valandin when he began his wars, because Mythal would be his mother in that context, and she would be like, "Hey, knock it off."
Mm.
But with Valandin and Elgernon, they seem similar in a lot of ways, because they both apparently had like some kind of anger issue,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and were very, I guess, bloodthirsty. I can't think of a better word right now.
I think the word that you've used is uppity.
Uppity. Okay, yeah, that works.
Uppity.
They both seem to, I guess, like you said, they rule with their hearts.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Um, I definitely get that father-son kind of vibe, especially with Mythal stepping in and her wisdom interceding. But it's just to get to that point, like especially how to put it. Whenever it comes to in the lore when it's talking about Elgernon, it rarely ever doesn't talk about him acting out in some way because he's angry at something. I'm just curious the implication of this codex, Duel of 100 Years, and what it's trying to say. What was the argument? I would love to have known. Like, was it just a disagreement on something? Because we know from other codex entries, what was it? The one with Selaise and June, where it was just about two architects disagreeing about a color, and I think one stabs the other over it. It's
Yeah,
just they just, I, if that's what an architect is like, what is it like between two deities or close to deities? It's just, was it something as simple as a disagreement over, my son, the curtains are just the wrong color. I don't like it. No, Dad, I want them to have stripes. No, circles. Something as simple as that? Or was it?
I could see
Oh,
that if it were two other gods, but because this is Elgernon and Valandin, some of the more, probably the two most violent of them,
mhm.
it makes me think this was probably a bigger deal.
It's when you look at Falandin and the other things he's done as well, like it was the Temple of Mythal where Solus points out how he started a war because he was very vain, he wanted more followers, and well, long story short, it didn't work out too well for him.
Right.
But it's just surprising that Elgernon didn't step in that kind of situation. It was Mythal, and she took a long time to do that. It's
Yeah.
just, what was this argument
Yeah,
about if
like
that
he says
happened?
Mythal rallied the other gods, so like
Mhm.
apparently only when his vanity reached her land.
Mhm.
And it's also the thing about that that's also interesting is that he got to keep being a god after that.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't say exactly how much of that godhood he kept, like, in terms of like a domain or lands, because they talk about having lands specifically, but it's weird. It's very, very weird.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, Solus does say like, um, I think your Inquisitor can ask like, "Oh, I'm surprised they didn't kill him. Why didn't they do that?" And he's like, "Well, you don't just kill a god." And my
Yeah.
theory towards that is, well, if one of the gods can die, why can't the others as well? So they probably wouldn't kill him because that would indicate, oh, the gods can die? Why don't we just kill anyone we don't like or disagree with?
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of my theory.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Which is why killing Mythal was such a big deal.
Right. Do we want to keep talking about Elgrenot and Falandin, or we want to move on to Mythal and somebody?
Uh, I don't think I have much more to say on it other than it's just a very interesting relationship. I
Yeah.
hope something comes of it.
The other thing I
But
remembered,
Mythal... Oh,
sorry, the other thing that I remembered is that Elgrenon built a statue of himself out of the bones of a fallen enemy. And that's just something
really?
I think is awesome. I'll try to find the, let me see if I can find the codex for that.
I was sure. I thought it was he just. I think he sacrificed a bunch of slaves to just speed up the process of carving out a mountainside or something. That's how I remember it anyway. I could be wrong. Let's see.
Let me see.
Was it Signs of Victory? Was that it?
Maybe?
The pages of this book, Memory, question mark, describe a monument made in a single afternoon by 1,000 toiling servants swarming over a lump of fallen stone at, as large as a collapsed mountain. So it might have been a titan or something. It might have been. Well, we know they can petrify people, so it might be a fallen foe.
Yeah, and since it's a sign of victory, I mean, I guess that means that Elgrenon won the battle. And
Presumably.
that is just so vain.
Yeah.
So prideful, it's impressive.
Mm-hmm. Hail Elgernon, first among the gods. Mark his victory eternal.
All right. So let's talk about him and Mythal.
Hmm. Did you want to go into the creation mythos or just? I'm trying to
We
think of
can
any
touch
other
on
chance
it. But basically, the creation legend is that Mythal came out of the water after Elgrenon buried the sun, and she convinced him to put the sun back in the sky and, create the day cycle. So,
Yeah, basically, yeah.
yeah, Mythal is generally painted as calming Elgrenon.
Yeah, I think our codex, Mythal the Great Protector, is from the Tale of Mythal's Touch. So yeah,
She placed
yeah.
her hand on Elgrenon's brow, and at her touch he grew calm and knew that his anger had led him astray.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there are
It's just
more.
a.
What? You go ahead.
I was gonna say that it's just a very weird description. Like, obviously, it's like a Dalish legend. Like they're trying to symbolize things in a way, but it's just a very weird description to put your hand on someone's forehead and they're like, "Oh yes, of course," you know.
Yeah, no, I mean, as far as creation myths go, this is a good one. And it
Mm-hmm.
makes me wonder, like, how this relates to the real story, if at all.
Yeah. I don't think there's much relating Mythal and Elgernan outside of Dalish beliefs beyond her intervening or oh, what was the one codex where I always remember it just the sinner belongs to Dirthaman, blah 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 blah.
And we're definitely going to get to that. Mythal
Yes.
interceded to stop an argument between Dirthaman and, well, not Dirthaman, just, or no, she didn't intercede, did she? She,
No, that was the story she gave the person to Elgranon because I don't know why. That's
yeah,
why it's interesting.
I mean, Mythal was the protector. Her sphere was kind of justice, and
Mhm.
Elgranon seems to be vengeance. Uh,
Yeah.
and I get that. Like, those are two sides of the same coin.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
just, I mean, we know Mythal. Is she had a temper too. And, she's done some questionable things.
Yeah.
And, I mean, I can buy that she had a thing with Elgranon. Because it seems
Mhm.
there is a history in Dragon Age of women being betrayed by their husbands or lovers.
Oh yeah. Well, there's so many examples of
Yeah.
that.
So, yeah, I can see their relationship, but it's so hard to say because we don't know
Yeah.
how, like, the politics worked back then.
Yeah, trying to imagine a society in that sense, not just even just recognizing our own ancient civilizations in the real world. It's just there's a lot you just can't get because you're not from that time. And in fantasy, like there's an extra layer of that because you don't know if it's something the writer intended or if it's something you're just looking a bit too deep into.
Hmm. And that's something it gives me a headache, but I also really appreciate it about Dragon Age. That this
Hmm.
stuff is left vague and open to interpretation by the characters and
Yeah.
by extension the player.
Mhm. I
But
think I. Oh, sorry.
oh no, go ahead.
I was just gonna say like I appreciate I was listening to I can't remember the exact interview. I'll probably put it in the description or something, but it was Patrick Weeks talking about writing Solus, for example. He was saying how he wanted to be able to write this entirely fully realized character, but also not completely abandoning the mythology side of it. He wanted to be faithful to what mythology surrounding Fen'Harel was. So there's definitely echoes of that. So I feel like since he's the lead writer, maybe going into Dreadwolf or any future books or something, if they talk about other evanuris, some of the stuff in the codexes will be somewhat true. Because it's definitely somewhat true, some of the stories about Fen'Harel,
Right.
to a degree. Yeah.
What stands out to me about the creation myth in particular is Elgranon's father was the sun. To the Dalish and to the elves, the lower class elves at the time, Elgranon was a god.
Hmm. Hmm.
What does that make the sun?
Yeah, okay. So in relation to like Greek mythology, they had primeval deities that are not quite gods, but they were like predating the gods. You had the Titans, you had the Hundred Handers. Then what was it? Uranus, and
Uranus.
Gaia. One
Okay.
of them, yeah. And they were kind of the primeval deities from which all things came. Uranus was an embodiment of the heavens in a way, of light, kind of like the sun. And then you had Gaia, who was of the land, I believe.
Hmm.
And from them, a lot of the Titans and whatnot came, and then the whole story. But before that, there was chaos as well, and the other word for chaos was the void. I don't know if you would want to go into that in a bit, but it's
We'll talk about that when we get to Andrew.
yeah.
We got a long way to go. All right. So the thing about burying the sun, the only thing that brings to mind is how the old gods are buried.
Mhm.
And my theory has been since Trespasser that the war that the Evanuris originally fought in as generals was against the old gods,
Mhm.
as Yavanna refers to a time before the Veil where dragons ruled. So that always made sense to me. But then in the same myth, the sun rises again, so yeah, I don't know. We can talk about the sinner now.
Oh goodness.
The sinner belongs to Dirthaman.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm trying to remember which codex that was. I think it was a Vir de Faro one,
Yeah,
maybe. Oh, you sent
I got it. Yeah.
perfect.
Okay, so it's only
Mm.
discernible with the Well of Sorrows.
Oh, huh,
So you
I didn't
can't
know
you
that.
can't get this if you didn't drink from the Well of Sorrows. So clearly, I mean, with this sort of thing, it's almost like the will of the well and the people that previously used it they want you to know this. So,
Mm.
like, it's clearly, this is important. And it seems like, it's more about the character of Mythal and that this guy begs for her protection and she says no. So,
Mm.
I guess it's to show, like, her version of justice. But the sinner belongs to Dirthaman, and he claims he took wings at the urging of Gillenan. So, I mean,
Mm.
right there is a connection between Gillenan and Dirthaman. It's like, was Dirthaman in on this? Was the sinner telling the
Yeah.
truth? It could
Mm.
also be because Gillenan didn't start out as a god. She became a goddess. So maybe the sinner, when he says he took wings at her urging, it was like he was saying, oh, if she can become a god, why can't I?
Mm-hmm.
The question also is, how did he even do this? He dared to fly in the shape of the divine. Seems like he shapeshifted into a dragon, which was reserved for the gods and their chosen. How did he do that? Well, I figure if he belongs to Dirthaman, he could have stolen Dirthaman's secret somehow.
Yeah.
They're,
I think
yeah.
I was just gonna say maybe it's also possible that this is a huge scheme that we're not entirely aware of. Like maybe Dirthaman and Gillinan were working together to undermine the other ones because Mythal doesn't give this guy protection. She doesn't judge him. She gives him to Elgranan. I just think that's bizarre given the circumstances. Like
The thing about,
she's the protector.
but the thing about Gillenan is that I think when she became a goddess, she, what's the word? She threatened the balance of power.
Ah.
What it seems like is that she wasn't around for the war. By the time Gillenan became a god, everyone else was already a god.
Yeah, she feels very much more of a creation type of deity. Like when you think of the Hala, you think of these graceful, beautiful symbols of the people, symbols of perfection in a way. She feels like an aftermath kind of god, or goddess rather. That's I definitely see her as separate from the others, especially since she's the only one that has a physical description. Like more connected to the rest of the elven people in a way.
Right. And so I want to talk about the sinner for a second because I heard a theory that this sinner was one of the Forgotten Ones, or would go on to become one of the Forgotten Ones. And that just ties Gillenan in even more with
Yeah, yeah.
uh, threatening the balance of power.
Mhm. That's assuming he survived Elgernan's judgment.
Yes.
And also, just back to the entire codex in general, just the fact that this is specific to an inquisitor that drank from the well of sorrows, it's like it's trying to tell you. It feels more like it's not so much telling you about all of this, but trying to tell you something about specifically Mythal,
Yeah.
like how she isn't what she seems, and I guess we know that already, but it's giving. It's trying to tell us something, and I don't know what exactly it
Yeah.
is.
Well, the other big thing I want to mention that does not have much support at all, but it's just such a fascinating concept to me is the idea that um, Gillenan is Solas's sister.
Hmm.
So it ties back in to Gillenan wasn't a goddess and then she became a goddess.
Mm-hmm.
So Solas would have known her before and after her ascension.
Yeah, yeah.
A story that Felasan tells, and this might be reading into nothing, but a story that Felasan tells is that Solas was hunting the Hala, and Andrew was upset about that, but it says the Hala. So that could potentially be referring to Gillenan herself.
Yeah.
And that may have been what made Andrew so mad.
Mm-hmm. I always assumed that's what it was, because I can't imagine any other reason for her to be upset beyond maybe she's in charge of telling people, okay, you're allowed to hunt this creature this season.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe something like that, but I agree, like, the Hala feels like Huh. Especially with the other connections that Solus and lore has to Gillenan. Like, what was the codex? It was,
I think it was the
then
Ascension
she,
of Gillenan.
yeah.
She created sea creature. She was supposed to destroy all her creations, and she was gonna destroy her sea creatures, but pride, capital P, stopped her hand.
Yeah, yeah. That's gotta be on
Yeah,
purpose.
that's got to be Solus.
Hmm.
Why did Solus stop her from destroying those monsters?
Hmm. Well, I think it's one of two reasons. I imagine creating so many creatures, being proud of them, being so pleased with them, like, and then being told you have to kill all of them. I think that would be kind of heartbreaking. So I always assumed it was Solus taking pity on her, saying, "Okay, no, you don't have to do this. You can leave them be." Or it could be he wants to use them for one reason or another. Like it's going to benefit him in some way at some point.
Right. And
Especially since. Oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say it could be both.
Yeah, yeah.
So who's next? I mean, I guess we can touch on Gillenan and Dirthamin. The major connection I have with them is just a mural that you find scattered around Inquisition of a white figure with hollow horns being
Hmm.
embraced or maybe attacked by a bear, which is Dirthamin's sacred animal.
Yeah, yeah. I always loved that mural specifically. Just it's a really pretty one, but with that I forgot it already. Was it yeah, ancient elven writing. With that one, with that connection between Dirthamin and Gillenan, I feel like maybe there is some connection there. So, well, we know that Gillenan was creating monsters. She, especially with Horror of Hormak,
Mm-hmm.
we know she was doing some pretty messed up stuff.
Mm.
And I feel like Dirthamin, as someone who's all about knowledge and secrets, and he's got to know everything. I feel like maybe he's not omniscient or anything. Omnipotent? Omniscient?
Omniscient.
That one, yeah. Maybe he doesn't know everything, but I feel like he'd be in on everything at least.
Mm-hmm.
Like keeping tabs on everyone.
Right. The other thing is that in the Lost Temple of Dirthamin, yeah, reused assets are frustrating to me in Dragon Age, but that is one of the
Mm.
places where you can find images of what we assume to be the scaled ones and
Yeah.
um, very bizarre looking animals that almost look like the insectile hala that we hear about in Horrors of
Mhm.
Hormak.
I'm trying to find the actual. I have an edit of those somewhere where it kind of I feel like it's trying to show like Gillinan obviously in the center, but they're kind of similar portrayals. Well, the one on the right is like the eight-legged horse with wings and like gold streaks and whatnot on it. But that's coming from on the left, this warrior-looking character,
Mm-hmm.
with his curved blade and shield. But I feel like that's saying, okay, this becomes that monster. And below it's just a naked elf guy. And then on the right is a scaled one. So I kind of assumed, oh, so that becomes that. So, like,
Could be.
yeah, I don't know. That's just my theory on it, because I feel like, well, they put them there for a reason, maybe. But it could also just be reused assets. They look pretty.
Yeah. I guess Andrew should be next. Let's talk about her and Gilnan.
Oh, goodness.
So, Andrew is kind of a big topic because
Yeah.
she was the one who advocated for raising Gillinan to become a goddess.
Mhm.
Uh, but also, it seems, at least later in her reign, she and Gillinan kind of split apart. And it seems like deeper into her reign, she started going mad, and Gillinan, I don't want to say became her enemy, but just became a target.
I can see that.
There's the puzzle in Trespasser where one sees the hunter, one flees from it, one hunts it
Mm.
in turn, and one outwits them all, and the solution would suggest that the Hala is fleeing from the hunter. Andrew went into the void, became corrupted by it, and then it's heavily implied to be the blight spread across her lands.
Hmm. I know that's a big theory, but I've just never really been convinced by it.
No?
I feel like
What do you think?
I don't know. I just feel like she goes to the void hunting the forgotten ones and whatnot, and she brings back some kind of plague. I'm trying to find what the exact word used was. She held things meant to be forgotten, and the other gods became fearful. Andril would hunt them in turn. But I don't know. I don't know if it was I'm not convinced it was the blight, honestly. And I don't know, I couldn't explain to you why. I just feel like that's too simple a solution for what the blight is. I'm not saying it couldn't be at all. It's just there's something they're missing that I would need to convince me otherwise. It doesn't sound like the blight to me.
It does to me, so I don't know. I guess we'll just have to disagree on that.
Yeah.
But either way, Andrew, she's she, she she's a handful of a topic,
Mm.
because there was also in that same story that Felisan told, after she captured Solus, she told him, "Okay, you have to serve me in bed for a year and a day,"
Oh goodness, that
and that
one.
is pure sadism.
Yeah. Like I'm pretty sure that is a thing in probably folklore and whatnot. It's just coming from Felisan and who probably these stories are probably valid in some way.
Hmm.
Um, but also just oh, really now? Okay. Poor Solus. It's a good thing he's clever. I don't like Andrew.
No, me either. She's my least favorite.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It's just weird also because she has like would that be before Gillina? I know like it's not confirmed that they were together in that in a how do you put it in a
Romantic.
romantic
Yeah.
relation yeah romantic relationship. It's not confirmed, but it's very heavily implied. But it's like what was that before Gillina or was that after? Like
It probably would have been after if Solus was already their enemy.
oh, yeah.
But also, Solus is weird because, okay, yeah, he staged a rebellion. He had a
Mhm.
sanctuary for fleeing for former slaves,
Mhm.
and he made a big deal publicly about, hey, they aren't gods. They aren't real gods. They're just people.
Mhm.
But also, he served in court, or like he talked about how he missed court intrigue,
Yeah.
and he could have done that like in disguise, I guess. Like he probably didn't show his face very often.
Mhm. Mhm.
Actually, yeah, now that I'm saying it out loud, yeah, because the evanuris propaganda was like, beware the dread wolf. He comes in disguises where he's very humble.
Mhm. Mhm.
He offers advice that slowly turns to poison. So
I mean,
yeah,
a degree of that is propaganda to be sure, but
it's also true. It is true.
it's
That's exactly what
absolutely
happened in Inquisition, which is
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
I think the last major relationship we have to examine would be Solace and June.
Hmm.
They're interesting because they're just kind of off doing their own thing.
Yeah. They're doing the least out of everybody, definitely.
It's like it's like they're barely even involved with the others of them. They're both supposedly siblings to Andruel, and also maybe lovers. So,
Well, maybe both. Hopefully not.
uh, who knows? Because they're so vague. We know so little about them. Um, in the Temple of Mythal, there's a codex entry for June that says the oldest depictions of him uh, show him with none of the tools that are typically associated with him.
Hmm. Hmm.
He is he's credited with giving the elves fire, and Solace
Yeah.
is the hearth keeper, keeper of the home, yeah, and like domestic arts and stuff. But
Mhm.
so little is ever said about them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if this was in the lore or not, but I always assumed June came after Soleil's for some reason. And I really couldn't tell you why. I just feel like she's more integral than maybe it's because there's more lore on Ahara than June, but
Hmm.
it just feels like she's more woven into the rest of them than he is.
Yeah, I could see that. We also know in Virdathara, so Solace gave June a gift as thanks for a great favor, which was the Senalium, which is just a weird thing.
Hmm.
Um, it's interesting that the Virdathara entry refers to Blessed Solace and Clever June.
Yeah. Let's see
So,
if I have a note on that, but I have a note on the Senalium, though. It sounds like a combination of mausoleum and solarium. So a mausoleum being an above ground tomb, and a solarium being a sunroom.
hmm.
That's maybe like, here's your nap room, honey. I made you a man cave. It kind of sounds like. Uh, the clever June and blessed Solace. I feel like being blessed is a lot better than being clever. So I feel like she's kind of like a rank above him, is my interpretation of that.
Right, but I have to wonder what made June so clever. If he's not credited
Mm,
with the tools or fire, what did he do to earn this favor?
yeah. I have a theory.
Okay.
I think I've heard elsewhere where people think that Jun is a dwarf or a half dwarf because his mosaic looks very Art Deco, I think is the word, which is kind of the style of dwarvish architecture. And I think there's something to that in a way. I feel like, did he like initiate some victory over the dwarves? Did he convince the dwarves to do something? Did he learn their crafts, kind of like Lithias, the dwarf son? Like he learned how to use the berserker fighting style because he
Mm-hmm.
went there and got a wife. But did he go to the dwarves and learn something and bring it back that was useful to the elves?
Could be he was
Is
the
what I'm
first.
thinking.
It could be he was the first to learn how to use lyrium.
Oh, I like that one. Or maybe he made some, I don't know, maybe he did some scientific discovery or something.
Mm-hmm.
Magical scientific discovery. I feel like there's something, some connection with the dwarves, because there is a lot of imagery that connects June to the dwarves.
Makes sense.
Uh, I don't know if you have much more to say on that, because there's so
No, yeah,
little.
no. I think that's about it.
Yeah.
You know, it would be great to get like a short story set in Elvenon, like near the end.
Oh, I would love an entire novel, like Masked Empire style.
Mm-hmm. Just I want to see like the interpersonal relationships, which is what this whole video is about. I want to
Yeah,
see more
yeah,
of that, like how the gods interacted and regarded each other.
yeah. It's never gonna happen,
I
but
know. Ugh.
there's always fan fiction.
Yeah.
That's a project to work on. Yeah. It won't be canon, but yeah.
Is this where we want to wrap things up?
Yeah, I think we've gone over everything we can.
All right. Well, we're really excited to hear what you guys think in the comments section.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Who are your favorite
Uh,
gods? What do you think of their relationships? Let us know.
which one was the worst? Why do you think it's not Andril?
All right.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you all for watching. We'll see you later.
Bye bye.
Bye.